I stared at my phone screen, my hands trembling so violently that I nearly dropped it onto the marble floor of my Brooklyn studio. The notification from Vogue's official Instagram account glowed like a beacon in the dim morning light. There I was on the cover of their September issue, draped in my own design, a flowing dress made entirely from reclaimed ocean plastics and organic hemp. The headline read, "Evelyn Reed, the revolutionary who proved them all wrong." But it was not the cover that made my heart stop. It was the text message that came through seconds later from my mother. "I see you finally made something of yourself. I suppose I should congratulate you now that Vogue has validated what I never could." I felt the rage bubble up from somewhere deep in my chest, hot and acidic. 6 years. 6 years of being told I was wasting my life, throwing away my potential, embarrassing our family name with my silly little fabric experiments. And now that a magazine had given me permission to succeed suddenly, I was worthy of her acknowledgement. If you have ever been told you are not enough by the person who is supposed to love you most, stay with me. This story gets better, I promise. But before I tell you how I got here, how I turned my mother's contempt into my greatest motivation, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment below telling me about a time someone doubted you. Because this story, my story, it is for every single person who has ever been dismissed, underestimated, or told their dreams were not good enough. Let me take you back to where this all began, to a lunch that changed everything. It was a Tuesday in March 6 years ago when my phone rang with that particular ringtone I had assigned to my mother. The one that made my stomach clench automatically, a Pavlovian response to years of criticism disguised as concern. I was in my tiny apartment in Bushwick, hunched over my secondhand sewing machine, working on a prototype for what would eventually become the signature piece of my first collection. Scraps of organic cotton and recycled denim covered every surface, and my fingers were stained with natural indigo dye. "Evelyn, darling, I need you to meet me for lunch on Thursday at the Gilded Spire," my mother, Eleanor Reed, announced without preamble. No greeting, no asking if I was available, just an expectation of compliance. "I am meeting with some very important people, and it would be beneficial for you to make some connections. Who knows, perhaps one of them might be willing to offer you a real job." I closed my eyes and counted to 5, a technique my therapist had taught me. "Mom, I have a real job. I am building my own business." "Yes, well, we will discuss that at lunch. Do try to wear something presentable, won't you? Perhaps that Chanel suit I bought you for your graduation, not one of your little craft projects." The line went dead before I could respond. I looked down at what I was wearing, a prototype shirt I had made from hemp fabric paired with high-waisted trousers, cut from vintage military surplus. It was not Chanel, but it was me. Every stitch represented a choice, a value, a stand against the fast fashion industry that was destroying our planet. But my mother could not see that. She never could. Thursday arrived too quickly. I stood in front of my closet staring at the Chanel suit still in its garment bag tags, attached never worn. My hand hovered over the zipper, and for a moment I considered it. Maybe if I just played along just this once, she would finally listen to what I was trying to build. But then I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror, and something hardened inside me. I was 31 years old, not a child to be dressed up and paraded around. I pulled out my favorite piece from my own designs, a crisp organic linen shirt in cream. Structured yet soft, paired with wide-leg trousers, made from recycled polyester that draped like silk. I slipped on my handcrafted leather sneakers, made by a small cooperative in Portugal that paid living wages and used vegetable tanned leather. The Gilded Spire Country Club sat on a manicured estate in Westchester, the kind of place where memberships were inherited, and the waiting list was longer than the average human lifespan. I felt the stares as soon as I walked through the heavy oak doors, my sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished marble. Women in Hermes and Prada turned to look, their eyes scanning me from head to toe with that particular brand of upper-class disdain I had grown up with. My mother was already seated at a round table near the windows, overlooking the golf course, surrounded by 4 other women. I recognized them immediately. Clarissa Beaumont, chair of the Metropolitan Museum's Fashion Fund. Diane Rothschild, wife of the real estate mogul. Patricia Chen, a corporate lawyer who sat on the boards of half a dozen Fortune 500 companies. And Margaret Vanderberg, whose family name was literally on buildings across Manhattan. "Evelyn, finally," my mother said, her smile fixed in place like a mask. "Ladies, this is my daughter. Evelyn has been well exploring her creative side these past few years." The way she said creative side with that slight pause and delicate emphasis made it sound like a euphemism for unemployment. I slid into the empty chair, feeling the weight of their collective gaze. What a unique outfit, Clarissa said, her tone carefully neutral. Is that linen? Organic linen, I replied, meeting her eyes. From a farm in Oregon that uses regenerative agriculture practices. The buttons are made from recycled ocean plastic. How innovative, Diane murmured, though her expression suggested she thought it was anything but. My mother laughed, a brittle sound like breaking glass. Evelyn has always been my little activist. Ever since she was young, always bringing home stray causes. Remember when you tried to organize a protest against your own school's dress code, darling? You were what, 16 or not? 15, I corrected quietly. And it was not about the dress code. It was about the fact that the uniforms were made in sweatshops. Yes, well, Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. We all have our phases. The important thing is knowing when to move on to more practical pursuits. Which is actually why I wanted you to meet everyone today. Diane, didn't you mention your company is looking for administrative assistants? I felt my face flush hot. Mom, I am not looking for a job as an administrative assistant. I have my own company, Evergreen Apparel. Patricia leaned forward, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. Evergreen Apparel, I don't think I have heard of it. What exactly do you do, dear? This was my chance. I straightened in my chair and launched into my pitch, the one I had practiced 1,000 times in front of my mirror, in pitch meetings, with skeptical investors, at networking events, where I was inevitably the youngest person in the room. We create high-quality, fashion-forward clothing using only sustainable materials and ethical production methods. Everything is transparent from fiber to finished product. Last year, we did $4.7 million in revenue. We have a 12,000 square foot studio in Brooklyn, 34 employees, and a waiting list of over 15,000 customers for our next collection. The table went silent. I watched their faces, saw the flicker of surprise quickly masked. My mother's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Well, Margaret said slowly, that is quite impressive for such a young company. 4.7 million, you said. Yes, and we are projecting 8 million this year. My mother set her water glass down with more force than necessary. Evelyn has always had a vivid imagination. She tends to, shall we say, embellish her accomplishments. It is a little hobby business she runs out of a warehouse, really, sewing curtains and such. The dismissal in her voice, the casual cruelty of it, hit me like a physical blow. I had brought financial statements, I had documented proof of everything I was claiming, but I could see in her eyes that it did not matter. Nothing I said would ever be enough because she had already decided I was a failure. I opened my mouth to defend myself when Eleanor reached into her Birkin bag and pulled out her checkbook. Ladies, if you will excuse us for just a moment, I think my daughter and I need to have a private discussion. She wrote something, quickly tore out the check, and slid it across the white tablecloth toward me. I looked down. $50,000. Pay to the order of Evelyn Reed. This should help you close down this little experiment gracefully. She said, her voice low enough that the others had to lean in to hear. Use it to pay off whatever debts you have accumulated, and then we can find you a proper position. Diane has generously offered to interview you for her firm. The benefits are excellent, and you would have stability, a real career. I stared at the check, at my mother's perfect cursive signature, at the number that represented everything she thought I was worth. $50,000 to give up 6 years of work, 6 years of late nights and early mornings, of teaching myself accounting and supply chain management, of building relationships with fabric mills in Portugal and dye houses in Guatemala, of learning to lead a team and pitch to investors and stand firm in my values even when everyone told me I was wrong. Something inside me snapped. I picked up the check slowly, deliberately. Then, maintaining eye contact with my mother, I tore it in half. And then in half again, and again. The pieces fluttered onto the table like confetti. You cannot buy me, Mom, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. You cannot buy my dreams or my values or my self-respect. I built Evergreen Apparel with my own hands, my own sweat, my own tears. Not with your money or your approval. I do not need either. Eleanor's face went white, then red. How dare you embarrass me like this in front of my friends after everything I have done for you? Everything you have done for me. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. You have spent the past 6 years telling me I am a failure. You have mocked my work, dismissed my accomplishments, and made it clear that unless I am living the life you want for me, I am not worthy of your respect. Well, I am done trying to earn something you were never willing to give. I grabbed my bag and walked out of the Gilded Spire Country Club, my sneakers squeaking on that perfect marble floor, and I did not look back. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit in my car for 15 minutes before I felt steady enough to drive. I cried the whole way back to Brooklyn, great heaving sobs that made my chest ache. But underneath the pain was something else, something that felt almost like relief. The next few weeks were a blur. I threw myself into work with an intensity that worried my team. Maya Rodriguez, my best friend since Parsons, and now Evergreen's head designer, finally cornered me in my office one evening as the sun set over the Brooklyn waterfront. "Eve, you need to talk about what happened with your mother," she said, perching on the edge of my desk. "You have been working yourself into the ground." "I am, Finn." I insisted, not looking up from my laptop where I was reviewing production schedules. "You are not fine. You have been here until midnight every night this week. You are surviving on cold brew and spite." I laughed despite myself. Spite is a powerful motivator. It is also not sustainable, ironically enough. Maya closed my laptop gently. "Talk to me." So I did. I told her everything about the lunch, the way my mother had looked at me like I was an embarrassment to the family name. I told her about all the years before that, all the little cuts and dismissals that had accumulated like scar tissue. The time she forgot to come to my Parsons graduation because she had a spa appointment. The way she introduced me to people as her daughter, who had gone to fashion school with that particular emphasis, that made it sound like a hobby rather than a degree. The Christmas when she gave my sister, the corporate lawyer, a BMW and gave me a gift card to Nordstrom with a note that said, "Perhaps you can find something professional." Maya listened, her dark eyes fierce. "You know what you need to do, right? You need to prove her so spectacularly wrong that she chokes on it." "That is not why I do this," I protested. "I know. You do this because you believe in it, because you are trying to make the fashion industry better, because you care about the people who make our clothes and the planet we live on. But would it hurt to also completely demolish your mother's narrative about you being a failure?" No, it would not." I smiled, feeling some of the weight lift. "Okay, so how do we do that? We work harder than we ever have. We make the best collection Evergreen has ever produced. We tell our story, the real story, to everyone who will listen. And we trust that the right people will notice." What I did not know, what neither of us knew, was that the right people were already paying attention. 2 weeks after the disastrous lunch, I was in the studio early as usual, reviewing fabric samples from our supplier in India. My phone buzzed with an email from an address I did not recognize. The subject line read, "Vogue Feature Inquiry." I stared at it for a solid 30 seconds before my brain processed what I was seeing. Vogue, as in the Vogue. The email was from an editor named Rebecca Chen, asking if I would be interested in being interviewed for their annual Women Who Are Changing Fashion issue. They had been following Evergreen Apparel for several months, she explained, and were impressed by our commitment to sustainability, our transparent business practices, and our rapid growth. I screamed. Literally screamed loud enough that Maya came running from the pattern cutting room, thinking someone was injured. What happened? Are you okay?" I held up my phone, unable to form words. Maya read the email, and then she screamed too. Within minutes, the entire studio knew, and suddenly we were having an impromptu celebration with the cheap champagne we kept in the office fridge for closing sales deals. But in the back of my mind, I could hear my mother's voice. "They must have made a mistake. They will realize you are not important enough." I shook my head physically, trying to dislodge the thought. No, I was done letting her voice live in my head rent-free. The interview with Vogue was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Rebecca came to the studio with a photographer and a journalist named James Liu. They spent an entire day with us touring the production floor, interviewing my team, examining our supply chain documentation. James asked smart, probing questions about our business model, our challenges, our vision for the future. "Why sustainability?" he asked at one point as we sat in my office overlooking the studio floor. "It would be so much easier, so much more profitable to do what everyone else does." I thought about how to answer, about all the carefully crafted responses I had prepared for moments like this. But something about James's direct gaze made me want to be honest, because I cannot live with myself otherwise, I said. I cannot create beauty at the expense of someone else's humanity. I cannot make clothes that end up in landfills after 3 wears. I cannot participate in a system that treats both people and the planet as disposable. And yes, it is harder. Yes, it is more expensive. Yes, there are days when I wonder if I'm crazy for trying to do this. But then I think about the women in Portugal who sew our garments, who are paid fair wages and work in safe conditions, who tell me that our orders allowed them to send their kids to university. I think about the organic cotton farmers in India who do not have to use pesticides that poison their land and their bodies. I think about the customers who write to tell me they finally found clothes that align with their values, and I know it is worth it. James smiled and made a note. That is going to make a great pull quote. The day after the interview, while I was still buzzing with excitement, still allowing myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was really happening, my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize, but the area code was Manhattan. Ms. Reed, this is Veronica Hayes. I froze. Veronica Hayes. We had gone to Parsons together, had been in the same cohort, had competed for the same scholarships and internships. Veronica had always been talented, but she had also been ruthless in a way that made me uncomfortable. She had graduated and immediately landed a position at Fast Trend, one of the biggest fast fashion retailers in the world, churning out trendy designs that were manufactured in questionable conditions and sold at rock-bottom prices. We had not spoken in years. Veronica, this is unexpected. I heard about your Vogue interview. Congratulations. Her tone was flat, emotionless. I wanted to reach out because I think you should know that people are talking. Talking about what? About evergreen apparel, about whether your supply chain is really as ethical as you claim. There are questions being raised about your manufacturing partners, about whether you are actually paying fair wages or if it is all just marketing spin. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Everything we do is documented and verified. We have third-party audits. We publish our financials. We are completely transparent. I am just telling you what I'm hearing. You know how the industry is. Once questions start getting asked, it does not matter if they are true. The doubt is enough. She paused. But I am calling because I wanted to give you a heads up. We used to be friends after all. We were never friends, Veronica. We were classmates. There is a difference. Suit yourself. I am just trying to help. She hung up before I could respond. I sat staring at my phone, my mind racing. This could not be happening. Not now. Not when everything was finally coming together. The next morning, I woke up to my phone exploding with notifications. Someone had created a thread on Fashion Forum, one of the biggest industry gossip sites, questioning Evergreen Apparel's ethical claims. The post was detailed, almost professionally written, citing anonymous sources who claimed we were using sweatshop labor in Eastern Europe and lying about our material sourcing. It was all lies, completely fabricated, but it was also specific enough to sound credible. By the time I got to the studio, 3 of my newest hires were waiting in my office, looking nervous. Is it true? Asked Marcus, a pattern maker I had hired just 2 months ago. The stuff people are saying online. No, I said firmly. It is absolutely not true. Every single claim is false. We can prove it. But how? Asked Sarah, one of our seamstresses. How can we prove something is not true? People believe what they want to believe. She was right, and that terrified me. I spent the rest of the day in crisis mode, calling our lawyers, reaching out to our suppliers, compiling documentation. We released a statement on our website and social media inviting journalists and auditors to verify our claims. I scheduled a press conference for the end of the week. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Veronica's call, about the timing of everything. It was too convenient, too calculated. Someone was trying to destroy what I had built, and I had a pretty good idea who. The press conference was held at our studio. I had expected maybe a handful of local reporters, but the room was packed. Fashion journalists, business reporters, even a crew from NPA. I stood at the podium, my hands gripping the edges to keep them from shaking, and I told the truth. Evergreen Apparel was built on a foundation of transparency and ethical practices, I began. Every claim that has been made against us this week is false. But I do not want you to just take my word for it. I want to show you. I gestured to the screens behind me where we had projected our supply chain documentation, our audit reports, our financial statements. This is our studio in Brooklyn where we design and produce our samples. These are our manufacturing partners in Portugal, where our garments are sewn. Here are the contracts showing their wages, which average €32 per hour, more than double the Portuguese minimum wage. These are our fabric suppliers in India, certified organic and fair trade. Here are letters from our partners, testimonies from the people who work for them. I clicked through slide after slide, building a case not just for my innocence, but for my integrity. By the end, several reporters were nodding, taking notes. I welcome any journalist, any auditor, any skeptic to verify these claims. I finished. My door is open, my books are open, because I have nothing to hide. The questions came fast and intense, but I was ready for all of them. The conference lasted almost 2 hours. When it was over, I felt wrung out, but cautiously hopeful. Maya found me afterwards sitting alone in my office with the lights off, watching the sunset over the Brooklyn rooftops. You killed it out there, she said softly. We will see. The story is already out there. The damage might already be done. Then we will rebuild like we always do. I turned to look at her, this woman who had believed in me from the very beginning, who had taken a risk on a startup when she could have had her pick of established houses. Why did you come work for me, really? You could have worked anywhere. Maya smiled. Because you were the only person at Parsons who actually meant it. Everyone else talked about changing the industry, about making fashion more sustainable, more ethical. But you were the only one who was actually willing to do the hard work. The unglamorous, difficult, expensive work of actually building something different. I wanted to be part of that. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment before my phone buzzed. An email from Rebecca Chen at Vogue. Eve, I wanted to reach out personally. We have reviewed the situation and conducted our own verification of your claims. Everything checks out. The story will run as planned. In fact, given recent events, we would like to expand the piece and potentially feature you on the cover of our September issue. This is not just about fashion anymore. It is about integrity in business, about standing up for your values, even when it is hard. Let me know if you are interested. I read the email 3 times before the words sank in. The cover, the September issue, the single most important issue in fashion publishing. Maya, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, you need to read this. The next 2 months were a whirlwind. The Vogue team came back for additional interviews and a multi-day photo shoot. They brought in Annie Leibovitz to photograph me, actually. Annie Leibovitz in my studio, surrounded by bolts of organic fabric, and my team. They styled me in my own designs, which felt both surreal and perfectly right. During the shoot, Annie told me, you have something special, not just the clothes, though they are beautiful. It is you. You believe in what you are doing, and it shows in every stitch. We did not tell anyone about the cover. Vogue wanted to keep it under wraps until the official announcement. But somehow word leaked. It always does in the fashion industry. My phone started ringing with interview requests, partnership offers, investment pitches. Retailers who had passed on carrying our line suddenly wanted to schedule meetings. And then there was my mother. She called 3 times, left 2 voicemails, sent a series of increasingly terse text messages. I ignored all of them. I was not ready to talk to her, not yet. Maybe not ever. The day before the Vogue issue was set to drop, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Evelyn, it is Veronica. I almost hung up immediately, but something in her voice made me pause. She sounded off, tired, maybe even scared. What do you want, Veronica? I need to talk to you in person. Can we meet? Why would I do that? So you can sabotage me again? I know you think I was behind those rumors, she said quietly. And you are right, I was. The admission caught me off guard. Why would you do that to me? Because I was jealous. Because you were doing what I always claimed I wanted to do but was too afraid to actually try. Because it is easier to tear someone down than to face your own cowardice. She took a shaky breath. And because someone offered me money to do it. What, who? I cannot tell you over the phone. Please, just meet me. Tomorrow morning before the Vogue issue comes out. There is something you need to know. Against every instinct, I agreed. We met at a small cafe in Soho neutral territory. Veronica looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes, her normally perfect appearance slightly disheveled. She was drinking black coffee and picking at a croissant she clearly had no intention of eating. Thank you for coming, she said as I slid into the seat across from her. Talk, fast, I have a million things to do today. I was approached by someone who wanted to damage your reputation. They offered me $50,000 to start rumors about Evergreen Apparel's supply chain to create doubt about your business practices. They said they wanted to, and I quote, take her down a peg before she gets too big for her britches. Who was it? Veronica pulled out her phone and showed me a series of emails. I read them, my stomach turning with each line. The sender was using an anonymous email account, but there were details that made it clear they had insider knowledge about me, about my business, about my personal life. And then I saw it. A slip in one of the emails, a reference to the Gilded Spire Country Club. Only a handful of people knew about that lunch. My mother, I breathed. My mother paid you to sabotage me. I do not know for certain, Veronica said quickly. But the evidence points that way. And I am sorry. I am so sorry. I needed the money. Fast Trend fired me last month for missing quotas, and I was desperate. But that is no excuse. What I did was inexcusable. I sat back in my chair, feeling like I had been punched in the gut. My own mother. She had not just dismissed me, not just mocked me, she had actively tried to destroy what I had built. What changed? I asked. Why are you telling me this now? Because last night I got a call from a journalist at Fashion Week Daily. They are doing an investigative piece on fake review campaigns and paid sabotage in the fashion industry. They had traced the rumors back to me and they have the emails. The story is going to run tomorrow, the same day as your Vogue cover. I will be exposed, but so will whoever hired me. I wanted you to hear it from me first. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt triumphant. But all I felt was tired and sad. My mother hated me so much that she had paid someone to ruin me. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. For what it is worth, I hope you figure out what you really want to do with your career. Because you are talented, Veronica. You always have been. You just need to stop tearing others down to make yourself feel better. I left the cafe and walked for hours processing everything. By the time I made it back to my studio, my team was waiting with champagne. The Vogue cover had just been posted online, a preview before the physical issue hit stands in the morning. There I was standing in the middle of my studio floor, wearing a flowing dress I had designed from reclaimed ocean plastics and organic hemp. My hair was loose, my feet were bare, and I was smiling. Not a posed artificial smile, but a real one full of joy and pride and hard-won confidence. The headline read, "Evelyn Reed, the revolutionary who proved them all wrong." My phone exploded. Texts, calls, emails, DMs. Congratulations from friends, colleagues, people I had not spoken to in years. Interview requests from Good Morning America, The Today Show, NPR. Partnership offers from major retailers. Investment pitches from venture capital firms. And one text from my mother. I need to see you tomorrow. It is important. I stared at that message for a long time before responding. Studio, 10 a.m., come alone. That night, I barely slept. I kept rehearsing what I would say to her, how I would finally tell her everything I had been holding back for 31 years. But when morning came and I saw her black Mercedes pull up outside the studio, all my prepared speeches evaporated. Eleanor Reed walked into evergreen apparel like she was entering a potentially contaminated space. Her Chanel suit immaculate, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. She looked around at the cutting tables, the sewing machines, the racks of finished garments, the inspiration boards covered in fabric swatches and sketches. My team had been briefed to give us privacy, so the studio was empty, except for the two of us. "So this is where you spend all your time," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the open space. "This is where I built my life," I corrected. "This is where I proved you wrong." She flinched slightly. "Evelyn, I came to apologize." "For which part?" "For spending 6 years telling me I was a failure, for mocking my work in front of your friends, for paying Veronica Hayes $50,000 to sabotage my business." Her face went white. "How did you—" "She told me. And a journalist is going to tell everyone else in about," I checked my watch, 3 hours when Fashion Week Daily publishes their exposé. Eleanor sank into one of the chairs at the conference table, suddenly looking every one of her 62 years. "I never meant for it to go that far. But you did mean to hurt me. You did mean to prove I was making a mistake. You did mean to force me to give up and come crawling back to your world, where success is measured by country club memberships and designer labels. I was trying to protect you." Her voice rose, cracking slightly. "I know what this industry is like, Evelyn. I have watched it chew up and spit out dreamers for 4 decades. I saw what happened to your father when his gallery failed. I could not bear to watch you go through that same pain." This was new information. My father had died when I was 12, and my mother never talked about him, about his art, about the gallery he had tried to run in the village. I had inherited his creativity, his love of beautiful things made by hand, but I had never known about the business failure. "So you decided to crush my dreams before the world could," I asked quietly. "I decided to be realistic, to steer you towards stability and security. I thought if you saw how hard it was, if you faced enough obstacles, you would choose something safer. But I did not want safe, Mom. I wanted this. I wanted to build something meaningful, something that aligned with my values. I wanted to prove that you can be successful and ethical at the same time. And I did it. Without you, despite you, all." Eleanor's hands were shaking as she reached into her handbag and pulled out a copy of Vogue. My face stared up at us from the cover. "I saw this in the lobby of the building where I get my hair done," she said softly. The receptionist was reading it and she said, "This woman is amazing. She is proof that you do not have to compromise your values to be successful." And I realized she was talking about you, my daughter, and I did not know you at all. I watched her trace the edge of the magazine with one perfectly manicured finger. I read the article 3 times. Did you really turn down a $12 million acquisition offer from a fast fashion conglomerate because they would not agree to maintain your ethical standards. Yes, that was incredibly brave and incredibly foolish. It was the only choice I could live with. She looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something in her eyes that was not criticism or disappointment. It might have been respect. The journalist quotes you saying that you built this business without traditional family support, proving that the only validation that matters is your own. That is me you are talking about, is it not? Yes, you called me out publicly without naming me, but anyone who knows us will make the connection. I told the truth. I built this without you. I succeeded despite your constant predictions of failure. And yes, I wanted everyone to know that. Because there are thousands of other people out there being told by their families that their dreams are not good enough, that they should play it safe, that they should give up. And I wanted them to know that you do not need your family's approval to succeed. It helps, God knows it helps, but it is not required. Eleanor stood up, walked to the window overlooking the Brooklyn waterfront. I spoke to Diane Rothschild last night. She called me after seeing the Vogue article. Do you know what she said? She said, Eleanor, your daughter is doing what we all talk about doing but are too afraid to try. You must be so proud. She laughed bitterly, and I realized I should be. I should be bursting with pride. But instead I am standing here knowing that I spent 6 years trying to destroy the best thing my daughter ever did. Why? The question came out raw, desperate. Why could not you just support me? Why could not you believe in me? Because I was afraid, she said, simply turning to face me. Because your father believed in himself too, and when he failed, it destroyed him. He became depressed, withdrawn. He stopped painting. He stopped seeing his friends. And 2 years later, he was dead. The doctor said it was a heart attack, but I always wondered if it was just a broken heart, a broken spirit. And I could not bear the thought of watching you go through that same pain. This was the most honest my mother had ever been with me. I could see the tears in her eyes, the genuine pain, but I also felt the anger, the years of accumulated hurt rise up in my chest. So you decided to break my spirit yourself, to save me from potential failure by guaranteeing I would feel like a failure, Mom. Do you have any idea how much damage you have done? I am beginning to understand. She walked toward me slowly. Evelyn, I know I cannot undo the past 6 years. I know an apology is not enough, but I am asking for a chance to do better, to actually learn about what you have built here, to support you, truly support you going forward. I wanted to say yes. Part of me, the part that was still a little girl desperate for her mother's approval, wanted to forgive her on the spot. But I had learned something in the past 6 years. I had learned that forgiveness without boundaries was just another form of self-destruction. Here is what I need from you, I said carefully. First, you issue a statement to Fashion Week Daily, clarifying that you had no involvement in the smear campaign against me. You make it clear that any rumors about Evergreen Apparel's ethical practices are completely false. Second, you publicly support this business. Come to our next fashion show. Wear our clothes. Tell your friends the truth. Third, you actually learn about what we do here. Not so you can critique it or offer unsolicited advice, but so you can understand it. And fourth, you go to therapy. Because, Mom, you need to work through your fear and your grief about Dad, and you need to stop projecting it onto me. Eleanor looked shocked. I had never made demands of her before, never set boundaries. I had always been the compliant daughter trying to earn her love through accommodation. And if I do all that, she asked, then maybe we can rebuild our relationship. But it will not be the relationship we had before, where you got to dictate the terms and I got to swallow my hurt. It will be a relationship between two adults who respect each other's choices, or it will be nothing at all. My mother stood very still for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. Okay, I will do it, all of it. I will believe it when I see it, I said. But there was a tiny flicker of hope in my chest. The Fashion Week Daily article came out that afternoon, and it was devastating. For Veronica, for the reputation of paid sabotage in the industry, and for my mother. Because even though Eleanor issued the statement I had asked for, the article made it clear that the money trail led to an account associated with her name. The fallout was immediate. Her social circle, those women who valued reputation above all else, turned on her. She was asked to step down from 2 charity boards. The Gilded Spire Country Club launched an ethics investigation, and I felt not triumphant but sad. Because at the end of the day, she was still my mother, and watching her face the consequences of her actions was harder than I had expected. But I also felt free. For the first time in my life, I did not need her approval. I had built something extraordinary, and whether she acknowledged it or not did not change that truth. The weeks following the Vogue cover were insane. We had to hire a PR firm just to manage all the interview requests. Sales exploded. We had to bring on 15 new employees and expand our production. We raised a Series B funding round at a valuation that made Maya scream when she saw the term sheet. Major department stores that had turned us down before suddenly wanted to carry our line. But the moment I will never forget came 3 months later at our fashion show during New York Fashion Week. We had been granted a slot after the Vogue article came out a prime time on the official calendar. I had worked myself nearly to collapse preparing the collection, but it was perfect. 28 looks that told a story about transformation, resilience, and the beauty of creating something with integrity. The show was held in our studio, which we had transformed into a kind of industrial garden with living plants growing up through reclaimed metal structures. The runway was made of recycled wood. Every seat was made from mushroom leather, a new sustainable material we were experimenting with. I watched from backstage as the venue filled up. Anna Wintour in the front row, editors from every major fashion publication, buyers from Nordstrom, Bloomingdale's, Net-a-Porter, celebrities I had idolized my whole life. And there, 3 rows back, sat my mother wearing a coat from our last collection. She had kept her promises, all of them. She had gone to therapy every week. She had visited the studio twice asking questions and actually listening to the answers. She had worn our clothes to 3 charity events and posted about it on social media. It was not enough to erase 6 years of damage, but it was a start. The lights dimmed, the music started a haunting remix of a protest song from the 60s, and the models began to walk. Each look was more stunning than the last. Structured blazers made from pineapple leather, flowing dresses in pea silk that had never harmed a silkworm, trousers in recycled ocean plastic that draped like the finest wool, colors derived from plants and minerals. Every piece was a statement, a rebellion against an industry built on exploitation and waste. When the final model finished her walk, I took a deep breath and stepped onto the runway for my bow. The audience rose to their feet, applauding. I scanned the crowd and found my mother. She was crying, actually crying, her perfect makeup running, and she was clapping harder than anyone. After the show, the studio was mobbed with people wanting to congratulate me, to place orders, to schedule meetings. But I pushed through the crowd to my mother. "You came," I said simply. "Of course I came. I promised I would." She reached out and squeezed my hand. "Evelyn, I am so sorry for everything. I was wrong about you, catastrophically, completely wrong. I know. That collection was, I do not have words. It was brilliant. You are brilliant. Thank you." And I meant it. Her approval still felt good. I could not pretend it did not. But it was not the foundation of my self-worth anymore. It was just a nice bonus. A man in an impeccable suit approached us, hand extended. "Ms. Reed, I am Marcus Chen from Goldman Sachs. We represent several interested buyers who would like to discuss an acquisition. We are talking about a valuation in excess of $100 million. I smiled politely. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate the interest. But Evergreen Apparel is not for sale. Not at $100 million, not at $1 billion. This is not about an exit strategy for me. This is about building something that lasts, that makes a difference." He looked stunned. You are turning down $100 million. I am turning down the chance to watch someone else undo everything I have built. But please feel free to invest if you believe in our mission. We are always looking for aligned capital." After he walked away, shaking his head in disbelief, my mother laughed. "You really did it. You really built something they cannot buy. Something that is worth more than money." "I learned from Dad," I said quietly. "He taught me that art without integrity is just decoration. Fashion without values is just costume. And a life without purpose is just existence." "He would be so proud of you," she whispered. "I wish he could see this." "Me too." That night, after everyone had left and the studio was quiet again, I stood alone in the space I had created. I thought about the scared girl who had walked out of the Gilded Spire Country Club 3 years ago, who had torn up her mother's check and walked away from everything familiar. I thought about all the nights I had cried myself to sleep, wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. I thought about the moment I saw my face on the cover of Vogue, proof that I had not been crazy, that my vision was valid. But mostly I thought about the future, about the 28 new employees who now had jobs that paid them fairly and treated them with respect, about the farmers and fabric producers whose lives were better because we insisted on ethical practices, about the thousands of customers who could finally buy clothes that aligned with their values. about the young designers who had reached out to tell me I had inspired them to start their own sustainable brands. I had not just built a business, I had started a movement. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Turn on Channel 7 News now. I pulled up the live stream on my laptop. There was a segment about New York Fashion Week and they were showing footage from our show. The anchor, a polished woman in her 50s, was saying, "But the real story of Fashion Week is not about the clothes, though they are stunning. It is about Evelyn Reed, the designer who proved you do not have to compromise your values to succeed. In an industry built on exploitation and waste, she is showing us a different way. And the fact that she turned down a 9-figure acquisition offer today, that tells you everything you need to know about her priorities." I watched the clip of me on the runway, taking my bow, my team behind me applauding. I looked happy, I looked free. I looked like someone who knew exactly who she was and what she stood for. And I realized something. I had spent so many years trying to prove my mother wrong, trying to show her I was not a failure. But that was never really the point. The point was proving to myself that I could trust my own vision, my own values, my own definition of success. I did not need a magazine cover or a 9-figure valuation to validate me. Those things were nice, do not get me wrong. They opened doors and gave me a platform. But they were not the source of my worth. My worth came from the fact that I had looked at an unjust system and decided to build something better. My worth came from the fact that I had chosen integrity over ease every single time. My worth came from the fact that I had stayed true to myself, even when the person who was supposed to love me most told me I was wrong. That is the thing about being told you are not good enough by someone you love. It is devastating. It makes you question everything about yourself. But it also gives you a choice. You can internalize their criticism and let it define you, or you can use it as fuel, as motivation to prove to yourself, not to them, but to yourself, that you are more than their limited vision of you. I chose the second path, and it saved my life. 6 months later, my mother and I had dinner at a small restaurant in the village, not far from where my father's gallery had been. We talked about his art, about his dreams, about what he might think of evergreen apparel. We laughed about some of my early design disasters. The collection that looked like I had dressed people in potato sacks, the time I accidentally dyed an entire batch of shirts bright orange instead of the subtle peach I had intended. "I am really trying," she said over dessert. "I know I have been a terrible mother in so many ways, but I want to do better." "I know you do," I said, "and I appreciate it. But Mom, I need you to understand something. Even if you had not changed, even if you had never apologized or supported me, I would still be okay. Because I do not need your approval anymore to know I am valuable. That is what I have learned through all of this." She nodded slowly. "That is exactly as it should be. That is what I failed to teach you when you were growing up, that your worth is inherent, not conditional. I am glad you figured it out on your own." "Me too." We paid the bill and walked out into the cool night air. My mother hugged me goodbye, and for the first time in years, it felt genuine. "I love you, Evelyn," she said. "I am sorry it took me so long to show it properly. I love you too, Mom, and I forgive you, but I do not forget, and that is okay too." I walked back to my apartment in Brooklyn, taking the long way through the park. I thought about everything I had learned, everything I had survived. And I realized that my story was not unique. There were thousands, maybe millions of people out there who had been told their dreams were not good enough, that they should settle, that they should play it safe. People who had been dismissed, underestimated, mocked by the people who were supposed to support them. And I wanted them to know something. I wanted them to know that you do not need permission to build the life you want. You do not need validation from people who cannot see your value. You do not need to wait for someone to give you a chance. You can create your own chances. You can prove them wrong, not to change their minds, but to free your own. So here is what I want to ask you. Has someone in your life ever told you that you are not good enough, that your dreams are too big, too impractical, too risky? Has someone you love ever tried to shrink you down to a size they could manage, a size that did not threaten their own insecurities? If the answer is yes, I want you to know something. They are wrong. They are projecting their own fears onto you. They are trying to protect themselves, not you. And you do not have to accept their limitations as your own. You can walk away. You can set boundaries. You can build something beautiful out of their doubt. You can turn their skepticism into your superpower. But most importantly, you can decide that their opinion of you, no matter how much you love them, does not get to define your worth. Only you get to decide that. Only you. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever felt dismissed or underestimated, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, And leave a comment telling me about a time you proved someone wrong. Because those stories matter. Your story matters. And the more we share them, the more we empower others to write their own endings. Remember this. Success is not about proving other people wrong. It is about proving yourself right. It is about looking in the mirror and knowing you stayed true to your values even when it was hard. It is about building something that matters more than money, more than status, more than approval. I am Evelyn Reed. I tore up my mother's check. I turned down $100 million. I built a fashion empire on principles instead of profit margins. And I did it all without permission. What are you going to build?